It was a famine-stricken winter. Mom pulled the cotton out of a dead man's coat, and made a padded jacket for me and my brother. Mom never played favorites, except this time. She gave me the warmest, softest jacket. She said I was frail. I needed to stay warm to survive the winter. My brother, who doted on me, never took my things. But this time, he swapped jackets with me. Later, my brother froze to death on a cold winter night, wearing the jacket that was meant for me. Mom frantically cut open his jacket. A bunch of willow catkins flew out. She broke down crying. "Why did you wear your sister's jacket? This jacket will kill you." In the end, my brother's frozen body was buried by Mom next to Dad and my younger brother. Mom knelt before Dad's grave and cried until she had no tears left. She said it was all her fault for failing to protect the last male heir of the family. Mom made me kowtow to my brother. "Remember, your life was given by your brother. Live well for him." That same day, Mom set aside all the remaining food, and wrote a line of words on the table with her blood. It said, "What's left isn't enough for two to survive the winter. If she dies, I can live." When I returned home after searching for food, Mom had already hanged herself from the roof. I cried myself unconscious holding her body. When I woke up, I heard Mom scolding the servants in the courtyard again. "All of you, remember this. Our Lin family is not short on money, especially when it comes to food. Leftover meat and dishes like these, just throw them away." I rolled out of bed in a flash. Without even getting dressed, I shot out the door like a cannonball. I had been reborn. Reborn 1 month before the famine arrived. "Mom, what are you doing? This is meat. How can you throw it away?" The taste of the famine from my past life was etched into my bones. That winter, I didn't even dare drink an extra sip of rice porridge mixed with guanine clay. I was too scared to have more than a sip. In the end, I was so hungry I gnawed on tree bark and chewed grass roots. Seeing a frozen lump of dirt on the ground felt like finding a treasure. But this piece of meat, in my eyes, was more precious than gold or jewels. I desperately took a huge bite, not caring about anything else. The salty, gamey taste spread in my mouth. The familiar flavor instantly brought tears to my eyes. Mom was startled. She rushed over and grabbed my arm. Her voice was frantic. "Sure, what's wrong with you? You can't eat meat thrown in the dog's bowl." "Mom, listen to me. In 1 month, there will be a snow disaster. It will snow for 3 whole years. The mountains will be sealed, the roads blocked. Half the villagers will freeze or starve to death. Rice will become more expensive than gold. Even if our family has all the money in the world, it'll be useless." The servants around us looked at me, like I was a madwoman. Mom had to shoo everyone away, and pulled me into the house. Once inside, she asked me if what I said was actually true. If it was true, how could I possibly know all this? Looking at my familiar mother before me, I couldn't help but throw myself into her arms. Tears streamed down my face. I told them how, during the famine, the Shin family sold me off. My father was furious. "That Shin Yen treated you like this? During the famine, he kicked you out, just to save food for his stepson. And he calls himself a scholar. What a disgrace. Your mother and I were even planning to give you shops and 100,000 taels of silver as your dowry." The angrier my father got, the more my mother tried to calm him, saying none of this happened. Maybe I just had a nightmare, and was talking nonsense. Shin Yen might still pass the imperial exams and become a top scholar. He could serve in court. How can we break off such a good match, just because of a few words from me? Hearing my mother's words, I immediately stood up. I swore to the heavens that I would never marry him. Shin Yen, as a scholar, was arrogant. He never looked up to me, a merchant's daughter. After marrying him, I suffered immensely. In my past life, I followed Shin Yen around, spent a fortune on him, and vowed to marry no one else. He, a mere scholar, though he looked down on this merchant's daughter, was ultimately swayed by money. Later, when the snow disaster and famine hit, everyone was starving, skin and bones. Our family had run out of food too, and he sold me for just 3 flatbreads to get a full meal for the stepson he kept outside. If I hadn't fought my way back home from the trafficker, I would have ended up as someone's concubine. Thinking of this, I looked out the window. It must be about this time now. "Mom, do you believe me? The Shin family's matchmaker will be here any moment, and she'll definitely come empty-handed, bringing only a marriage proposal letter, certain I'd be desperate to marry him." Sure enough, as soon as I finished speaking, the steward's urgent voice came from outside. He announced the Shin family's matchmaker had arrived. My mother gave me a wary look. Before she could say anything, the matchmaker was let in. Indeed, she brought no betrothal gifts. She presented a marriage proposal letter. Back then, I was overjoyed he agreed to marry me. I immediately agreed to enter his household, with a lavish dowry, given a second chance at life. I won't jump into the same fire pit. "Matchmaker, go back and tell Shin Yen I will not marry him." The matchmaker was stunned. She asked if I was really Lin Xiu. I nodded. The matchmaker said, puzzled, the Shin family told her to come empty-handed. Sure, I wouldn't refuse. Hearing this, my father was so angry he smashed a vase on the spot. Shards flew everywhere. Outrageous. How dare he insult my daughter like this? He knows what he's keeping. Outside on the side, the matchmaker didn't dare say another word, and hurried away. Not long after he left, young Master Shin barged in, ignoring all attempts to stop him. No wonder I fell for him. His looks are truly top-notch. The neighbors pointed and gossiped, saying, Such a handsome scholar is willing to marry me. It's practically a steal for a merchant's daughter like me. After hearing that, Shen Yan was utterly smug and arrogant. His tail was practically wagging up to the sky. Lin Xiu, you took 100,000 taels of silver to humiliate me, and now you want to take back the dowry and call off the wedding. This is utterly intolerable. Having lived a second life, and looking at this face, that once captivated me, I feel like I've swallowed a fly, utterly disgusted. As for a scholar like him, I'm more than a match for 10 of him. How could I have been so blind to fancy him back then? I let out a cold laugh. Shen Yan, do you really think you're some top scholar? You're just a pet I paid to keep. I said I'd marry you, and you actually believed it. If you behaved yourself, I might have kept you around, but you dared to secretly raise an adopted son behind my back. That remark hit right where it hurt. His face instantly turned ashen. Humiliated and furious, he asked me, did you have me followed? Only after saying it did he realize he'd given himself away. Once I pass the imperial exam and become a high official, I'll have you charged with insulting a court official. Watching him flee in panic, I cursed him bitterly in my heart. Heartless bastard. This time, I won't waste a single grain of food on you. That day's events proved exactly what I'd told my parents, so they no longer doubted what I said. Under cover of darkness, Father brought back a cart full of banknotes, telling me this was all the family assets that could be mobilized right now. After counting the silver, I immediately started making arrangements. First, I had my parents hire people to buy rice, flour, oil, grains, and all kinds of meat. For meat that doesn't keep well, we'll dry it over fire to preserve it. Then we can eat it whenever we want. Also, our family has an abandoned courtyard in the countryside. It's a bit small, but it's perfect for taking refuge. After the famine broke out, refugees kept increasing. They specifically targeted large mansions. In my previous life, in the first month of the famine, our home was completely looted. I instructed Father to remember to hire some blacksmiths to reinforce the country courtyard with iron, and have people dig a cellar. We can store our food underground. That'll be safer. After hearing my plan, her eyes lit up. She said to bring the best pastry chef from the mansion's kitchen. Even if the roads are blocked by snow, we'll still have delicious treats. My father is the best man I've ever known. Even if he were rolling in money, my mother is his only wife. So whenever he remembers how that young Master Shin treated me in my past life, he wants revenge. Find some unfamiliar servants. Have them pose as wealthy merchants from the western regions to buy grain from the Shin family. We must buy up all of their grain reserves. Don't leave a single grain behind. The Shin family is insatiably greedy. If the price is high enough, they'll sell every last bit they have. But right then, I hurriedly stopped the servant. Wait, we should do this just a few days before the snowstorm. Otherwise, if they see a profit, they'll rush to hoard grain overnight. That would backfire on us. And so, we prepared. Time quickly passed until the snowstorm was 3 days away. My brother and I filled several cellars with the cotton and fine charcoal we'd gathered. 600 caddies of cotton and cloth, 8,000 caddies of fine charcoal, and a mountain of firewood. My brother and I worked all day to fill the last cellar. Grain and meat keep well in the snow. Now, with all this, warm clothing and charcoal, we're finally safe. As night fell, my mother brought my younger brother back from the main mansion to our country house in time. As soon as she entered, she began briskly directing the servants to tidy up and start cooking. These servants were carefully chosen by my brother and me. Not only are they loyal to the Lin family, they're each as strong as an ox. With these burly men guarding us, even if refugees cause trouble, we stand a chance. While everyone was bustling about, I instinctively looked up at the sky. In the pitch-black night, goose feather snowflakes began to fall. What's going on? Why is it snowing now? Mother, is Father not back yet? Unlike my past life, the snowstorm arrived 3 days early. I was frantic. My father thought the storm was 3 days away. He's still at the main mansion, settling the remaining servants. My mother said with concern, this is the heaviest snow she's ever seen. If it snows like this all night, my father might not make it back. Even after being reborn, can I still not change my family's fate? Despair clouded my vision. But just then, a sudden, urgent knocking came from the gate. I thought Father had made it back. I opened the door eagerly, but it wasn't my father standing there. It was our old steward, looking frantic. Miss, something terrible has happened. But just then, urgent knocking suddenly came from the door, followed by my dad's voice, shivering from the cold wind, yet still booming with strength. He told my dear to open the door quickly. It's freezing out here with this snow. I listened closely. Only after hearing that familiar voice did my heart finally settle. I let out a sigh of relief. Dad's back. The servants quickly pulled open the heavy iron gate. My dad led in his jet-black steed, shook off the snow clinging to him, and as soon as he entered the courtyard, my mom came forward with a bowl of hot ginger soup, ready and waiting, urging him to drink it quickly, to ward off the chill. Dad took the soup and downed it in one gulp. Warmth flowed down his throat and into his belly. He finally felt alive again. He handed the reins to a servant, and strode into the warm, spring-like house. He hugged each of us, my brothers and me, making sure we were all safe and sound. Only then did a relieved smile finally appear on his face. The heavy snow continued to fall, showing no signs of stopping. The wind howled, like ghosts wailing and wolves howling. A few familiar villagers, carrying lanterns, passed by our house, braving the snowstorm. They had planned to head to the east end of the village together, to see if there was any firewood to gather, but they were stopped in their tracks, stunned, by the massive iron cage built around our courtyard. Someone couldn't help but exclaim, "Whose house is this? Why would they build such a tall iron cage around their own yard? Is it to keep thieves out?" Someone immediately retorted, "This isn't to keep out thieves." With this setup, even wild beasts would steer clear. The villagers started chattering and talking all at once. They all thought the weather this year was really off. It's not even past October yet, and it's already snowing hard enough to seal off the mountains. In the midst of their conversation, a familiar figure pushed through from behind them. That person looked at our yard, which was like an iron cage. He stuck his head in, and shouted my father's childhood name loudly, asking him why he turned the old country house into this state. "What are you trying to guard against?" My father looked in the direction of the voice, and found that the person was actually his own elder brother, my uncle. The brotherly affection in his bones immediately took over. Enthusiastically, he was about to rush out and open the door to welcome him, but I grabbed him back tightly halfway. I warned my father, telling him not to go and talk. In the previous life, during the famine, it was this uncle who led the way. He found the starving refugees roaming everywhere. Under the banner of carrying out heaven's will, they broke into our Lin family mansion, and stole all our food, ultimately causing our whole family to starve to death. Mother's eyes instantly turned cold. She looked at the tightly sealed iron cover, blocking Uncle outside the yard, not showing any surprise on her face. She snorted coldly, "Among your Lin brothers, your eldest brother is the worst. On the surface, he's all smiles, but behind your back, he's the one who took your things and cursed you to die." What my mother said was absolutely right. Uncle is inherently selfish and jealous, completely opposite to my father's kind-hearted nature. He's my dad's older brother, so he thinks he can get away with anything. For years, he's been using the Yanzhuang family name to swindle people. He's a total fraud. Taking money for himself was just a regular thing for him, and when his gambling addiction kicks in, he'd just go and gamble on credit. When the debt collectors came to our house, Uncle would lose 9 times out of 10. Back in those years, our house almost had all sorts of different people showing up to demand money. My dad knew all about everything he was doing, but because of their brotherly bond, he never said a word. He always thought brothers were as close as limbs. So what if Uncle took a little money? After all, our family was well off. We had more silver than we could ever spend. Helping out his older brother was the right thing to do. But my mom had long since had enough. Now, as soon as she heard that Uncle would end up getting our whole family killed, there was no way she was letting my dad open the door for him. She just called over a few strong servants, ignoring my dad's struggles, and had them drag him back inside. She threw Dad back into the room, stood guard at the door herself, and slammed the main house door shut without a second thought. Uncle waited outside for a long time. He didn't see my dad come out. Instead, he saw the gate shut tight. He immediately flew into a rage. Through the iron gate, he lost all decorum, and started cursing my dad out. He called my dad a coward, a grown man, completely controlled by a woman. He asked if Dad was worthy of our deceased parents. Without our mother's hard work and sacrifice, would Dad even be where he is today? Finally, he spat a big glob of phlegm into the snow. He called my dad a hypocrite worse than pigs and dogs. I slowly carried the bowl of braised pork my mom just finished making. I deliberately walked over to the iron gate, right in front of my uncle. I picked up a piece of steaming meat, and started eating it slowly and deliberately. With my mouth full, I asked him, "By the way, Uncle, you called my dad a pig. Then what does that make you?" The sauce on the pork was sweet but not greasy. The meat was tender and fall apart. It just melts in your mouth. It was so good it almost made me cry. In my past life, right up until I died, this was a delicacy I never even dreamed of. My uncle was fuming with rage at my smug, annoying act. He pointed at me and started yelling, "Eat, eat, eat. Why don't you just eat yourself to death? What right does a girl like you have to speak in our Lin family? Your father should have married you off even sooner." Hearing this, my mom was furious. She turned and went into the kitchen, grabbed a whole basin of freshly boiled water, and rushed out. Then she hurled it right at Uncle. The scalding water hit the iron mesh, most of it splashing onto the snowy ground. A cloud of steam rose up, but that terrifying force was enough to show her anger. She shouted sharply at Uncle, "Xiu'er is Lin Dihai's daughter. If she has no right to speak in our Lin family, what makes you, an outsider, think you do?" I deliberately wanted to provoke her again. I intentionally picked up another piece of meat from my bowl, and tossed it toward the majestic wolfhound. In the courtyard, Dahuang catches it in one bite, and eats it with relish. But my eyes keep darting toward Uncle outside the door. I tell him to stop yelling. Even my Dahuang isn't as loud as he is. I even kindly remind him to hurry home and eat while he still can. Better to die with a full belly now, than to starve or freeze to death in the famine later. Uncle is trembling with rage. He points a furious finger at me and my mother. He hurls a threat, telling us to just wait. He curses, saying what kind of person my mother is what kind of daughter she raised. He swears my father will divorce her sooner or later. After that, he leads the villagers away, grumbling as they vanish into the snowstorm. During the meal, I tell them again, in detail, how in my past life, Uncle colluded with refugees to kill our whole family and seize our assets. I lay out the whole story, but even after my long explanation, my father remains skeptical. He doesn't want to believe that his own brother, who grew up with him, could be so vicious. That night, he tosses and turns, unable to sleep. In the middle of the night, he knocks on my door. He asks me, full of worry, if Uncle is really as evil as I say. He's so troubled, looking so anxious and miserable. He seems more exhausted than an emperor, worrying over affairs of state. He looks out the window at the relentless snow, and his bleeding heart starts up again. He worries about what the villagers will do. Will they starve or freeze to death? He thinks our Lin family, with its great wealth built on the people's labor, should, at a time like this, distribute food to help them. My father, Lin Dihai, is a man true to his name, a man of great virtue, who cares deeply for others, and he meddles in everyone's business. To completely dissuade him from this dangerous idea, I had to ruthlessly douse him with cold water. I told him, once the famine begins, people pushed to the brink of starvation lose all sense of humanity. They'll do things even animals wouldn't. No one will remember his kindness then. They'll just be looters taking advantage. It started with the villagers he helped. When they ransacked our family's grain, they showed no mercy. They even wanted more. They didn't even spare my baby brother at my mother's breast. I confronted him. He felt sorry for those people. But what about them? They only resent that our family has food. They wish our Lin family would vanish in this famine. After hearing my words, my father was furious and shocked. His face turned pale. He finally abandoned the idea of opening the granary. The snow had been falling for 3 days and nights, with no sign of stopping. The snow in the courtyard was already knee-deep. The world was a vast expanse of white, with no sense of direction. Occasionally, villagers passed by our house, exchanging the news they'd gathered. Everyone said this year's heavy snow came too early and too fierce. The snowdrifts had blocked the only official road out of the mountains. Even the canal was frozen solid, because supplies from outside can't get in. Food and meat in town are getting more expensive by the day. The prices change every single day. Ordinary families can barely afford it anymore. Some people with a keen sense of smell, and some savings have already shut themselves in. They've started rationing their household food stores. But I know, this is just the beginning. In my past life, this blizzard kept falling on and off for a whole month. In the first 10 days, heavy snow blocked the mountains. Everyone who tried to go to the granaries outside for supplies got trapped on the road by the snow. The relief troops from the imperial court were also delayed. Everyone's food was limited. To survive, bandits and refugees started roaming everywhere, breaking down doors, killing people, looting and plundering. In the second 10 days, the snow still wouldn't stop. Everyone's reserves were long gone. Firewood and charcoal were all burned up. Countless people starved or froze to death. In the village, almost every night, you could hear the sound of mournful weeping. In the third 10 days, the heavy snow finally began to let up. But by then, all our houses were buried under thick snow. All the crops in the fields were destroyed. In the long, cold famine, we began the incredibly difficult task of rebuilding our homes. As I was lost in these painful memories, a tempting aroma pulled me back to reality. My brother came out from the kitchen, carrying a plate of freshly grilled chicken wings. The wings were sizzling with juices, with a golden, crispy skin, sprinkled with fragrant cumin and chili. He looked at me with such affection, telling me to come try the new flavor he'd been working on. He also told me that, to make sure I could have fresh chicken, even during the snowstorm, he'd specially built a warm shed in the yard, with planks and tarpaulin, and raised dozens of chickens in it. Later, the chicks would become hens, and the hens would lay eggs and hatch more chicks. So before this snow stopped, he could make me as much chicken as I wanted. Smelling the savory aroma, Mom carefully placed my baby brother, who had just fallen asleep after nursing, back into the cradle, and only then did she tiptoe over to eat. By then, the snow in the yard was piling up higher and higher. My dad came in with a big broom, having swept a path through the yard, but his whole body was frozen, his face and lips turning purple. Stomping the snow off his feet, he said with worry, if this snow keeps falling, in a few days, it might just bury our whole house. To avoid being buried by the snow, we had no choice but to arrange for the able-bodied men in the family to take turns shoveling, working day and night, to clear the snow from the courtyard walls and roof. After dinner, Mom and I had just settled down in the cozy, heated main room, and were ready to do some needlework. The big wolfhound in the yard suddenly started barking frantically, without any warning. Immediately after, shouts, rising and falling, came through the wind and snow. Lin Xiao, are you trying to freeze your husband to death by not opening the door? That tone of his, so full of himself and holier than thou, it sounded as if him agreeing to be my husband was some incredible blessing bestowed upon me. Lin Xiao. I scrambled up from my chair, hurried over to the door, and peered through a crack in the iron gate into the courtyard. In the darkness, a man holding a lantern was standing outside my courtyard wall, craning his neck, looking for me. It was none other than Xin Yan. How did he find this place? How dare he show his face here, amidst the swirling snowstorm? Xin Yan had actually brought his entire family to seek refuge with me. A courtesan, cloaked in black, was shivering behind Xin Yan. She looked utterly fragile. In her hand, she held a lantern that flickered dimly. The faint, yellowish light accentuated her delicate, doll-like face, making her look even more pitiful. A sudden gust of wind blew, and she swayed like a snowflake about to shatter. Then, with a soft gasp, she collapsed. Shen Yan's heart must have ached terribly. He quickly took off his own cloak, and carefully wrapped it around her shoulders, softly comforting Xiao Man. He said, "You've suffered." The courtesan promptly fell into Shen Yan's arms. In a sickeningly sweet voice, she cooed, "As long as my Shenlang is here, no blizzard is too fierce. I'm not afraid." Listening to this made my stomach churn. I almost threw up on the spot. No wonder Shen Yan's whole family adores her. Birds of a feather really do flock together. They're all equally disgusting. A sharp, harsh old woman's voice follows. "It's Shen Yan's mother. Didn't you say that Lin family's daughter was completely obedient to you, and completely devoted to you? Then why have we waited so long? And she still hasn't come out to open the door for us?" The old woman huddles in the wind and snow, frozen and furious from the blizzard. Even her words are dripping with malice. Before, she was begging to marry into our Shen family. Now she's throwing a tantrum and refusing to marry. What's with the spoiled princess act? You don't want to marry? Then we'll call off the engagement. Let's see who'll want you then. No matter how rich your Lin family is, no one will marry a woman who's been jilted. Then we'll see how your brother can ever hold his head up high again. Look at her, so scheming, and self-righteous. As if I care about my own reputation. But she doesn't stop to think. If I really cared about my reputation, how could I have done something as crazy as chasing her son in the street, throwing money around and throwing myself at him, now that I don't love him anymore? Even if his Shen family calls off the engagement, even if Shen Yan himself kneels and begs me now, I wouldn't give him a second glance. Shen Yan probably sees the main house door, with light spilling through the crack. He knows someone's inside. He gets even more worked up. He puts on a show of deep affection, calling out my nickname loudly, saying he knows I'm angry with him. Today, he specially brought Xiao Man to apologize to me together. When has Shen Yan ever bowed his head to me? He must have realized there's no food at home, afraid of starving and freezing in this heavy snow. That's why he remembered this sucker. He suppressed his temper, and said in a condescending tone, "Sure, my mother is an elder, after all. How can you let her freeze outside? Hurry up and invite her in. Tell your cook to make her some hot soup and food." Hearing this, I couldn't help but sneer. What a coincidence. Back during the famine in my past life, it was this old hag who braved the freezing wind and snow, insisting on going out to find a human trafficker, just to sell me off when she had the chance, all to help her precious son legitimately promote that prostitute to his official wife. So my hatred for Shen Yan's mother now runs even deeper than my hatred for Shen Yan himself. My mom inside the house was annoyed by the noise outside. She couldn't sit still any longer, so she threw on a thick coat and came out to see what was going on. My dad quickly stopped her. "No need for you to worry. It's just a few stray dogs barking outside. No need for my lady to handle it herself." With that, my dad took a few servants and stormed out with a fierce look, feeling like watching some drama. I followed him out. The moment Shen Yan saw me, his eyes instantly lit up like a starving wolf's. He cried out excitedly, "Xiao, you finally agreed to see me." I, meanwhile, crossed my arms, and leisurely had one of the most handsome servants hold an umbrella to shield me from the snow. I sat with my legs crossed, on a temporary brought-out official's chair, ready to watch the show. Seeing my grand display, Shen Yan flashed a look of humiliation, but he still played his part. With great ceremony, he bowed to my father and me. "Your son-in-law, Shen Yan, pays his respects to my father-in-law, and to my lady. If not for this heavy snow blocking the mountain, leaving my home short on food and meat, I would never have brought my elderly mother to trouble you." The prostitute behind him looked frail and delicate, but the moment she saw me, the corner of her mouth curled into a scornful smirk. Her look was practically a direct mockery, that I was a cheap, desperate hussy. I didn't need to think hard to know. Shen Yan must have told her all about the ridiculous way I chased after him back then. As if the Lin family daughters couldn't get married, Shen Yan braved the heavy snow all the way here. They must have gone hungry and sleepless on the road, enduring hunger and cold. I saw her lips were already chapped and peeling. Her cheeks were sunken from hunger. Yet, even in such a wretched state, she still put on the airs of a lofty scholar. I, Shen Yan, will definitely become the top scholar in the imperial examinations. When that day comes, I'll serve the court as a high-ranking official, and I will certainly remember my father-in-law's kindness in taking us in on this snowy day. I couldn't stand listening to this anymore. I let out a cold snort, picked up the hot chicken soup just brought from the kitchen, took a big bite of a chicken leg, and walked right up to him. Then I bluntly cursed him out. "Are you possessed by a ghost, or has your brain frozen solid? You worthless, empty-headed fool. How you got that provincial scholar title? Need I spell it out for you? And you still dream of being the top scholar? You'd better just take your little darling and go home to dream about it." As I was saying this, I suddenly remembered a crucial point. In this life, I didn't marry him, so naturally, he never got his hands on my lavish dowry of 100,000 taels of silver. I deliberately looked the courtesan up and down, and asked with feigned realization, "Are you still waiting for me to bring that 100,000 tael dowry, so you can buy your beloved's freedom? I suggest you give up on that idea right now." Shen Yan, having his true intentions exposed, instantly flew into a shameful rage. He simply resorted to shamelessness. He stiffened his neck and said, "Well, they have nowhere else to go. We can't just stand by and watch them die on our doorstep, can we?" Shen Yan's mother went even further, directly threatening us. She said if they die at our gate, and word gets out, the Lin family's reputation will be utterly ruined. Hearing that, I couldn't help but burst out laughing. I said, "You only died, but what we lost was our reputation. How could such a good thing exist in this world?" Right at that moment, my father called over a servant from behind me. He told him to bring some food to Shen Yan's family. Shen Yan glanced at the servant, and his face suddenly changed drastically. He started screaming like a madman. "Why is he at your house? He's the one who bought all our grain. But why is he at the Lin family's?" Shen Yan was so angry he beat his chest and stamped his feet. He cursed at the heavens, demanding to know why we would harm him like this. He argued that even if he, Shen Yan, was a bit of a playboy, he had never done anything to hurt the Lin family. "How could you be so vicious? Having someone trick us out of our grain, forcing my family to beg for rice in this heavy snow, starving and freezing." It seemed he still couldn't believe the reality before him. He looked at me with a complex gaze. He said I had never treated him this way before. I just watched him quietly, not a ripple of emotion in my eyes. Shen Yan looked at me through the cold iron gate, but I remained unmoved. I could even, right in front of him, calmly drink another bowl of chicken soup. In this frozen, snowy world, it was this sturdy iron gate that divided us into two completely different worlds. Outside the gate, he was starving, dragging his whole family along, with no hope of survival. Inside the iron gate, I ate my fill at every meal, dressed in fine silks, enjoying happiness with my whole family. The courtesan standing behind him finally sensed that something was wrong. She quickly steadied the faltering Shen Yan, and anxiously asked him what had happened. Shen Yan's mother finally understood as well. She clutched her chest, overwhelmed with rage, and suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. Pointing at me, she shrieked shrilly, "Damn you, our family's grain was swindled away by your servant." I wagged my finger, correcting her. "How can you call it swindling? We simply had foresight. We stockpiled food in advance, that's all," I retorted. "Back when you sold that grain to my servant, at an exorbitant price, like it was gold, why didn't you sense anything was wrong then?" Shen Yan supported his nearly fainting mother. The look he gave me was now filled with boundless hatred. "Lin Xiu'er, you remember this. From this day forward, I, Shen Yan, will never look at you again. I'd rather starve to death than beg a single grain of rice from you." True to his word, he left, taking his courtesan lover and his unsteady mother with him. Without looking back, they walked into the vast, snowy wilderness. The first round of the blizzard finally subsided for a moment. During these days, my whole family stayed safe and sound in our warm house. We ate and drank our fill. Because we had stockpiled so much food, we had enough surplus to last us for years, so we didn't deliberately go hungry to save food. In fact, our lives were even more comfortable than before the snow disaster. But unlike the comfort of our home, the villagers around us had gradually begun to show signs of famine. However, at this time, people's emotions were still relatively calm, because everyone was still hoping that the imperial court would send aid. They even naively believed that this blizzard would stop here, and clear skies would come soon. But they didn't know that the snow would never truly stop, and the famine caused by this snow disaster, and the ensuing plague, in my past life, tormented the people of this land for a full 3 years. After this round of blizzard, heaven gave us no chance to catch our breath. Not many days later, an even greater and fiercer storm returned. On this day, outside my family's iron gate, a crowd had gathered once again. Leading them was none other than my dear uncle, Lin Haiyong. He was ranting and raving, addressing a group of gaunt refugees with a desperate gleam in their eyes, with passionate and stirring emotional incitement. "It's them. Listen to me, everyone. The one living inside is my brother, Lin Dihai. He's a well-known wealthy merchant in the city. We're all starving to death. But what did they eat this morning? Delicious meat buns. My friends, if we all find a way today to break these iron gates and fences, we can seize the grain and meat in his house. Then we'll all be saved. All the villagers will be saved." When my dad heard my uncle's familiar, yet strange voice, he could no longer hold back. He rushed out of the house. I had told my dad in detail before how, in my past life, my uncle colluded with the refugees to destroy our family. Back then, he still held a shred of brotherly affection in his heart, unwilling to believe it completely. But right now, seeing with his own eyes my uncle inciting the refugees to besiege our own home, all his doubts, reluctance, and familial bonds instantly turned into cold hatred. My dad stood inside the iron gate, separated by the cold iron mesh. "I sever ties with you, Lin Haiyong. From this day on, I'll treat you as nothing but livestock. There is no longer any brotherhood between us." Hearing this, Lin Haiyong showed not a shred of remorse. Instead, He spat a thick wad of phlegm onto the snow. His face was full of contempt and madness. He shouted, "Who cares about being brothers with a spineless coward like you?" Saying, "My dad was a disgrace to the Lin family. He's not fit to lead this family. It's better for me to take over." As soon as he finished speaking, just like in my past life, he was the first to pick up a large rock dug out from the snow. He led the charge, hurling it hard at our iron mesh fence. He riled up the refugees behind him, passionately declaring, "Heroes, smash this iron cage. Once this iron shell is broken, we'll rush into the yard and take what we need. The heavy snow will surely fall again. For the sake of your wives, children, and elders, for the lives of everyone in the village." Charged together, I couldn't help but sigh to myself. Sometimes, the course of fate is truly hard to change completely. Even though we were given a second chance at life, and moved from our city mansion to this old country house to hide, the one leading the charge to kill us was still my own uncle, Lin Haiyong. Among these refugees, some were ordinary villagers, driven to desperation by the famine, but most of them were desperate outlaws with blood on their hands. They had long been driven mad by envy at the smell of meat wafting from our house. Now, with my uncle's instigation, each of them saw themselves as heroes of Liangshan, delivering justice on heaven's behalf. Under the banner of punishing the wicked, robbing the rich to aid the poor, they tried every trick in the book. They exhausted every method, and began frantically smashing our iron gate and fence. But these refugees clearly underestimated my father's determination to protect his family. They took turns attacking. They threw rocks. They hacked with the axes they brought. They even joined forces to carry a thick log, and used it as a battering ram. But after all that effort, after ruining a dozen axes, and exhausting themselves, the massive iron gate and fence didn't budge an inch. Not even a single decent scratch was left. I sat leisurely in an armchair in the courtyard, a brazier burning brightly beside me. I told a servant to add more high-quality charcoal, while I slowly sipped a freshly brewed cup of hot tea. Behind me stood a row of well-fed, energetic, burly servants. Each was broad-shouldered and thick-waisted, like mighty guardian deities. Their fierce eyes were fixed on the chaos outside, just waiting for my command. Through the iron fence, I addressed the crowd outside, that useless bunch of refugees, and drawled lazily, "Why don't you all just give it a rest? To be honest, this gate isn't your ordinary iron gate. My father paid a fortune to have it forged by a master craftsman. I don't understand the intricacies myself, but he once worked on the emperor's mausoleum. They say any iron he forges with his own hands can last 1,000 years without breaking." I took a moment to look closely at the refugees outside, and spotted many familiar faces among them. Faces I hated to the bone. I sneered inwardly. It seems the heavens are on my side after all. Even though I've moved locations, the enemies who deserve to die have all gathered here, not a single one missing. After finishing a cup of hot tea, I used tongs to pull out a few tangerines from the charcoal brazier. Their skins charred and fragrant, the insides piping hot. I began peeling one slowly and deliberately, while deliberately raising my voice, addressing the crowd outside, especially my dear uncle, and started laying my trap. "Listen up, everyone. That man leading you at the front, his name is Lin Haiyong. He's my own uncle. Actually, he's with us. We sent him out on purpose, to gather you all to smash down my family's gate. It's all a ruse. We needed an excuse, to gather all you wandering threats, in one place, so we can round you all up. After we kill you, we'll take your axes, and strip you of your winter coats, to hand them out to our servants for the winter." Those who were still rioting refugees stopped when they heard me. Their movements came to a halt in unison. They looked at each other. Their expressions shifted from rage to doubt. They ignored our iron gate, and instead turned to surround my uncle, Lin Haiyong, in the middle. One of them, a burly man, with a scar on his face, viciously grabbed Lin Haiyong by the collar, and demanded to know if what I said was true. Seeing the situation slipping from his control, Lin Haiyong panicked. He knew if they left empty-handed today, these hungry wolves he'd stirred up would tear him apart first, to prove himself, and to rally the crowd. He did something insane. He snatched a long-handled axe, and yelled for everyone to watch closely. He was going to climb the iron fence himself, and find a way over the top, but the recent snow and wind had coated the smooth metal fence with a thick layer of ice. It was slippery as hell, but Lin Haiyong was backed into a corner, like a crazed monkey. He scrambled upward using both hands and feet. Inside the yard, my family and I watched with our hearts in our throats. Just as he reached halfway up, the ice under his foot suddenly cracked. He let out a sharp cry. He lost his balance completely. The axe flew from his hand, and he himself came crashing down from the height. He fell silent on the spot. Lin Haiyong was dead. The crowd was stunned into a deathly silence. Then came sheer panic. Their leader was gone. What were they supposed to do? Right then, someone looked up, and pointed at a hillside in the distance, letting out a terrified scream. We followed their gaze. On the slope behind the mansion, after days of heavy snowfall, a massive cornice of snow had formed. And the vibrations from there, frantic pounding and shouting all afternoon, were the last straw that broke the camel's back. The huge cornice began to crack, groaning with a sickening sound. Before anyone could react, a tidal wave of snow, carrying boulders and broken trees, like a white dragon roaring down the mountain. The scene was apocalyptic. As if the sky was falling, the avalanche was too fast, too wide. The villagers and refugees surrounding my house couldn't escape. They were swallowed in an instant. Behind the sturdy iron fence, we watched the disaster unfold. Our hearts were filled with dread. My dad looked at the scene outside, flattened by the snow. He stood in silence for a long time. Finally, he just sighed and went back inside. I knew Uncle's death and this avalanche would leave a scar in his heart that would never heal. That night, no one disturbed us again. The world was eerily quiet. Only the wind howled, as if mourning the lives lost. After the riots and the avalanche, the course of events took a completely different turn from my previous life. In my past life, after Lin Haiyong seized my family's home, he used our family's grain as leverage to incite and recruit more rioters. Gradually, over the years of famine, he built up his own gang of thugs. He took over our family granary. With that capital in hand, he became the local tyrant of this area. He even declared himself a king, committing all sorts of atrocities and every evil imaginable. Those starving people who obeyed him might get a few scraps of food, barely hanging on, but those who defied him were killed without mercy or had their last means of survival stolen. And my father, Lin Dihai, in that past life, because he trusted his own brother too much, ended up dying a tragic death at his hands. I'll never forget how my dad, on his deathbed, begged and pleaded, begging him to spare my baby brother in my mother's arms and the rest of our family. But Lin Haiyong, right in front of my dad, with a sneering laugh, personally ended my little brother's life. Now, with Lin Haiyong dead early, the refugee riots he organized in my past life, which erupted everywhere, have vanished without a trace. There are far fewer. Life seems to have returned to calm, but everyone knows everything is different now. Our old village is completely buried beneath the snow. We've become the only survivors in this snowy wilderness. Dad dug out Uncle's body from the snow. On the hillside next to our home, he made a small grave mound for him. No tombstone, no offerings, a final gesture of brotherly duty. After that, my father stopped talking about helping our fellow villagers. Instead, he poured all his energy into fortifying our defenses and managing the estate. Our whole family lived in this isolated iron cage, truly living a life of retirement. The cellar was stocked with grains and meat piled high like a mountain, enough to last us for years. My mother, with her maids, experimented with all sorts of delicacies every day. Today, a whole roasted lamb. Tomorrow, ginseng chicken soup. The day after, some exquisite pastries. My brother, meanwhile, led the servants in martial arts drills, and tended to the chickens and ducks he kept in the greenhouse. He also carved me many intricate little wooden toys to cheer me up. Our days were rich and comfortable, as if the frozen world outside was just a distant dream. This peaceful life was something I wouldn't have dared dream of in my past life. That evening, my father, beaming with joy, held my baby brother who had just finished nursing, and was fast asleep, his face full of tenderness. I really hope this blizzard passes soon. Oh, right, what if we give the baby the nickname Pan Qing? No way, that's too delicate a name, sounds like a girl's. How about Tuanzi instead? For a family that's all together. My brother couldn't help but laugh, saying Tuanzi sounds even more like a girl's name. Then father's suggestion of Pan Qing. Outside, the snow fell thick and fast, the world bitterly cold, yet our whole family gathered around the warm stove, eating steaming hot soup and rice. Warm and happy, truly content. After a few rounds of drinks, my mother looked at us and couldn't help but wipe away her tears. She said, thanks to me, her daughter, and thanks to this famine, our family finally had the chance to be together every day. She sighed. Before the snow disaster, my father and brother were always out busy with business. They were never home all year. It had been so long since our family had sat together peacefully to share a proper reunion meal. The snow fell on and off. Then one day in the second month, the weather cleared up without warning. A golden ray pierced the clouds, spilling onto the pure white snow. It was the long-lost sun, finally breaking through. What a rare, beautiful day. Cozy in the warm house, I stretched contentedly. Suddenly, I heard my personal maid shouting behind me to come see a show. There's a barefoot doctor outside saving someone. At first, I wasn't interested at all. I lazily replied, so he's saving someone. What's so interesting about that? But my maid urgently added, the person being saved is Shin Yen. Hearing that, my heart immediately sank. How can they save him? If he's saved, I'll be furious on the spot. I didn't even have time to put down the half-peeled orange in my hand. Like a gust of wind, I rushed out into the courtyard. Through the sturdy iron gate, I saw in the courtyard a slender, handsome physician. Outside, he was tending to someone in the freezing snow. He had actually taken off his only cotton-padded jacket and covered the unconscious Shin Yen with it. He was left wearing only a thin inner garment, rubbing his hands and breathing on them while manipulating silver needles to revive Shin Yen. After nearly 2 months, Shin Yen had been starved beyond recognition. He was gaunt and sallow. If not for the faint rise and fall of his chest, he looked practically dead. I didn't know why he'd so coincidentally collapsed right at my doorstep, but he couldn't have been just passing by. Seeing that Xinyan still showed no signs of waking, the physician pulled a small knife from his robe, and without hesitation, slit his own palm. As the blood seeped out, he let it drip into Xinyan's mouth. What kind of living bodhisattva was this? He himself was emaciated, yet he was cutting his own blood to save another. Ignoring the servant's attempts to stop me, I opened the iron gate myself and rushed out. I yelled at him to stop, to let a scumbag like Xinyan just die. I ran over and grabbed this saintly man, and yanked him away from Xinyan. The moment my hand touched him, I suddenly noticed this living bodhisattva had a gleaming golden token hanging from his waist. On it, in an ornate dragon and phoenix motif, was engraved a surname. It was exactly the same as the royal surname of our empire. I was so startled I nearly jumped out of my skin. Could he be the son of heaven? He's not very old. He looks to be just over 20. Could he be a prince or the crown prince? From what I know, during the worst of the famine in my past life, the emperor did send his own son, traveling incognito, to gain experience and provide disaster relief. But back then, I was trapped in the Shin household, and never got to see this noble savior arrive. The man I pulled up didn't get angry. He just straightened himself up. He had a slender, upright frame. He looked at me, and asked calmly, "Miss, why are you stopping me from helping him?" His every move carried an imperial air that was almost too imposing to look upon. My mind raced. I immediately put on a smile. I pointed to the courtyard enclosed by the big iron gate, and invited him in. Why not come to my place for a simple meal first, then continue helping him? It's not too late. Lunch is almost ready anyway. We can easily set an extra place for you. He seemed a bit reluctant, but he nodded anyway. In that case, I humbly accept your kind offer. I knew this man's status must be extremely high, so I didn't dare stop him from helping any further. What if, after the disaster ends, he resumes his identity as the crown prince, and looks into today's events? If I'm charged with the capital crime of ignoring a royal in need, what will I do? I invited him into the courtyard. My servants, following my glance, dragged Xinyan, unconscious in the snow, to a woodshed in a corner of the yard. I didn't want him sullying our grounds. I hadn't forgotten that this man was a great saint, who cared for the common folk. If he insisted on staying with Xinyan, I couldn't very well leave a man of his stature out in the wind and snow. I led him through the front courtyard. Along the way, the household servants were busily cleaning up the aftermath of the blizzard. Inside the greenhouse, dozens of chickens my brother raised were clucking away. From the direction of the kitchen, the rich aroma of stewed meat wafted over. It stood in stark contrast to the dead, frozen world outside the walls. His thin clothes were soaked through by the storm, yet his lean frame remained straight as a pine. I noticed his exposed wrists and forearms were covered in small frostbite sores and cuts. His days traveling incognito must have been terribly hard. When my mother saw me bring a strange man home, she was taken aback at first, but seeing his noble bearing, and hearing my explanation, that he was a traveling physician, she warmly welcomed him. I personally fetched a brand new fox fur cloak I'd never worn, and draped it over his shoulders without a word. I also had the servants quickly prepare warming ginger tea and clean clothes. He seemed unaccustomed to such ordinary, familial warmth. He was a bit flustered by the hospitality, but with perfect courtesy, he bowed to my parents in thanks. Lunch was soon ready. The table was set with aroma-rich braised pork, a golden brown roasted chicken, steaming hot mushroom soup, and several delicate pastries and freshly brewed fruit wine. For someone who hadn't tasted meat in nearly 2 months, this was an overwhelming sight. His hand, which had been moving swiftly, paused briefly. In the end, he couldn't resist the temptation of the food. He ate with refined manners, but his pace was not slow. He must have been truly famished. My parents watched him, their eyes filled with affection. They kept serving him more dishes, as if looking at a child who had finally returned home after a long absence. I sat to the side, nibbling on pastries, while discreetly observing him. Though he was in a comfortable setting, a trace of lingering worry always clouded his brow. Clearly, he was still troubled by the disaster and the people outside. Such a crown prince, concerned for the world. No wonder he could create such a prosperous era in his past life. After a full meal, his complexion improved greatly. Concerned about Xinyan, we accompanied him to the woodshed, perhaps having warmed up, or perhaps smelling the food. Xinyan had already woken up by the time we arrived. The moment he opened his eyes and saw me, his cloudy eyes suddenly flashed with intense light. Then, he actually burst into loud sobs, scrambling and crawling to my feet. He was crying his eyes out. His face was a mess of snot and tears, rambling on and on about his regret. My dear, my darling, I must have been possessed by some demon. I never should have gotten involved with that courtesan. You are the finest, most beautiful woman I have ever seen in this world. Yet I was blind. I foolishly cast aside a precious gem like you, and chose that vile, deceitful courtesan instead. That damned, poisonous woman, for just a few corn cakes. She sold my mother to the slave traders. I saw it with my own eyes, them dragging her away. I thought at least with them, she might get a bite to eat. But who could have imagined? He didn't finish the sentence, but I understood what he meant. During the famine, many people, wanting one last full meal before death, would trade their last bit of grain for meat. As for what kind of meat it was, I can't bear to think about it for the rest of my life. Shen Yan knelt before me. He ground what little dignity a scholar has into the mud, all for a scrap of food from me. He even said, if I was still angry, he could go tie that woman up right now, for me to beat or punish as I pleased. Listening to him just made me sick. I snorted at him in contempt. Shen Yan, have you no backbone at all? Who was it that said he would never look at me again, and would never eat a single grain from the Lin family? Shen Yan's face stiffened. Then he had the nerve to argue shamelessly, saying he must have remembered wrong. Those words weren't spoken by a person, they were spoken by a dog. He definitely didn't say them. He still clung to a sliver of hope. He pointed at the silent physician beside him, and said to me ingratiatingly, this doctor must be someone you found to save me. He always knew I bring good fortune to my husband. As long as he's with me, he'll have the greatest luck. I couldn't listen anymore. I spat in his direction. I warned him that if he dared call me wife again, I'd throw him back into the snow for the wolves. Shen Yan was frightened by my glare. He swallowed those words back, and changed to calling me Miss Lin. He kept muttering that meeting me was the greatest fortune of his life. I couldn't be bothered with his pathetic act anymore. Instead, I turned and walked over, using a gentle voice I'd never had before, composed and proper, until I stood before that man. I told him there was no need to thank me yet. This Shen Yan is the one who colluded recently with the refugee leader, Lin Haiyong, in an attempt to breach my home and steal our grain. He's one of the masterminds. My past suffering wasn't for nothing. Luckily, I have a good memory. I remember back when I was starving at the Shin house. I often saw my uncle, Lin Haiyong, whispering with him in secret. At the time, I thought it was just ordinary dealings. Only after living a second life did I figure it out. No wonder in my past life, Lin Haiyong always knew the ins and outs of our Lin family. Shen Yan must have been the middleman. They conspired to wipe out our family and take everything. I laid out my theory in detail, and then I brought up how I'd heard the court sent an imperial envoy to provide relief, but he was attacked by refugees on the road. I'm sure Shen Yan was pulling the strings behind the scenes. While Shen Yan was unconscious earlier, I took the chance to chat with his servants. After piecing all the clues together in my head, I was almost certain that in the first days of the snowstorm, it was Shen Yan who led his men to deliberately misdirect the envoy's convoy. That's why they got trapped in the mountains and nearly died. As soon as I finished speaking, the doctor's eyes instantly turned razor sharp. All traces of his previous gentle, scholarly demeanor vanished completely, replaced by an intimidating, murderous aura that was hard to look at. He looked down at Shen Yan kneeling on the ground. He demanded to know if Shen Yan admitted his guilt. The oppressive air of someone long accustomed to authority was not something an ordinary doctor could possess. Shen Yan was completely dumbfounded. Only then did he realize what kind of person he had provoked. The crown prince dropped all pretense. How did you get your provincial scholar title? I despise cheaters in the examinations most of all. Who was the examiner you bribed to help you cheat? Tell me, and I'll let you die with a whole corpse. Shen Yan's face turned deathly pale. He collapsed to the ground with a thud. He kowtowed like a maniac, saying he'd confess to everything. If only the crown prince would spare his life. The crown prince naturally stayed at our home. His scattered personal guards emerged from somewhere. They quickly set up camp near our old country estate, turning it into an impregnable fortress. Shen Yan was taken into custody by them to be escorted to the capital for final judgment after the blizzard. My father heard how the prince saved a life with his blood and witnessed firsthand his keen insight and decisive punishment of the wicked. He was utterly in awe of him. He kept telling me, the prince has a heart of gold, yet he draws a clear line between right and wrong. He will surely be a wise and benevolent ruler. The heavy snow showed no sign of stopping. The situation outside grew more dire by the day. The prince, stationed at our house, handled disaster reports coming in from all over. He directed his capable guards to rescue people everywhere. Seeing this, my parents didn't dare slack off. They opened our family cellar and brought out all the grain we had stockpiled like a mountain. They offered it to the prince. This humble subject intended to distribute grain to the villagers. But the disaster is severe, and people's hearts have changed. Many have turned to banditry, looting and plundering, harming the innocent. I am powerless alone, fearing the grain would only aid the bandits, so I dared not act. Now, with your highness here, I will do my utmost to help. Please allocate this grain as you see fit, to save the people from this calamity. The crown prince was deeply moved. He personally helped my father up, and told him to stand at ease. I hear your name is Lin Dihai. If we get through this famine safely, I will report to my father upon my return, and have your Lin family rewarded. At this point, the crown prince's gaze suddenly shifted to me. A faint, almost imperceptible smile played on his lips. Lin Xiu, don't act so obedient. I saw you trying to hold back a laugh. My heart skipped a beat. My cheeks felt warm, but how could I not laugh? This is a royal reward. Ah, our Lin family has seen plenty of wealth, but the official title of a noble lady, this is my first chance to get one. It's a great honor for our ancestors. The famine that had tormented us for 3 whole years in my previous life, began to show signs of life, under the Crown Prince's decisive actions, and the support of our Liang family. In the 3rd month, as the heavy snow gradually ceased, things started to recover. The Crown Prince sent men to clear the mountain road, and subsequent relief supplies and troops flowed in continuously. Everything was moving in a positive direction. The days were getting brighter, but my mother seemed to have a heavy weight on her heart. She sighed all day long, always avoiding me, as if she had done something wrong to me. I chased after her for days, asking what was wrong. Finally, one afternoon, she took my hand. Looking at me with deep guilt, she asked if, in my previous life, she had really done such a thing to me. Mother, in my past life, I did this to you. I really gave you that coat stuffed with willow catkins, didn't I? He was silent for a long time. Then he murmured to himself, if it were now, I definitely wouldn't do that, even though he knew in his past life, he did it out of helplessness. Mother, I know you did that, for the sake of the bigger picture, and for the continuation of the Lin family line, but I'm not angry at all, because my brother loved me very much, and he loved you very much, too. He swapped coats with me. He traded his life for mine. Brother just wanted to tell you that your family line isn't defined by gender. My lively personality is partly thanks to my brother. Since I was little, he always told me, do whatever you like. If you want to study, go to the school. If you're bullied and want to fight back, then fight. But I also asked him if that was wrong, if it fit the 3 obediences and 4 virtues for women. I looked at mother and imitated my brother's tone from back then. I told her what my brother said. He actually said, screw the 3 obediences and 4 virtues. My sister doesn't need to follow those restrictive, stinking rules. Mother's eyes grew moist. She lived her whole life for the Lin family, but in that instant, she seemed to find her childhood self again, the one her father sold to the traffickers. She took my hand and said, during these months of famine, it feels like I've lived my life over again. Thanks to you, our family has managed to survive. Ever since the prince moved in, life in our household has changed in some ways. For instance, my brother no longer spends all day just practicing martial arts and playing with his chickens. Instead, he started poring over books on military strategy, and he'd ask the prince for advice every day. My father also shed his merchant habits, often discussing governance and people's welfare with the prince. His perspective has broadened considerably. As for me, I became the one who delivers snacks and tea to the prince. That's a title I gave myself, of course. Every afternoon, I would carry the delicate pastries my mother made to the study, disturbing the diligent prince at his work. At first, he was strictly proper, keeping a certain distance from me, but as we got to know each other, he became much more relaxed. He would chat with me about the strange tales from the capital, quiz me on my studies, and even let me grind ink for him. I noticed he had a particularly lovely smile, like the warmest sunshine in winter, capable of melting all the ice and snow. His fingers were long and strong. When he held a brush to review documents, there was an indescribable charm about it. That evening, I carried a bowl of lotus seed soup to the study again. He was deep in thought, staring at a map. I quietly set the bowl down, not wanting to disturb him. After a while, he finally noticed my presence. He looked up and smiled at me, a hint of weariness in his eyes. He asked why I wasn't asleep so late. I told him I saw he was working hard, so I brought him a late-night snack. He picked up the bowl and finished the soup in a few gulps. Then he looked at me, a probing look in his eyes. He suddenly asked me how I knew so much. Not only could I predict the snow disaster, but I also seemed to understand matters of the court. My heart skipped a beat. I knew he had grown suspicious after all. I had no choice but to tell him a half-truth. I once had a long, vivid nightmare. Everything in the dream matched reality one by one. That's why I've been trying so hard to change my family's fate. He listened quietly. He didn't press further, but his gaze grew unusually deep. He suddenly reached out, gently brushing away a fallen leaf that had somehow landed on my hair. His cool fingertips touched my hair. It made my heart pound like a little deer. He withdrew his hand. His voice was low and gentle. Thank you, no matter what. Not just for your family's grain saving countless people, but also for saving me. The weather grew warmer day by day. The snow in the courtyard began to melt, revealing the damp soil underneath. The old steward, along with a few senior servants, began to till the empty plots in the yard, preparing to plant some vegetables. The crown prince would occasionally shed his fine robes and change into servants' work clothes. He joined them in their labor with great interest. Though he was the heir to the throne, he was surprisingly good at farm work. He didn't put on any airs at all. He quickly got along with all the servants. I often sat in the rocking chair under the corridor, watching his busy figure among the fields. A feeling of indescribable peace and joy filled my heart. My brother would be right there, ruining the moment by telling me to wipe the drool off my face, so His Highness the Crown Prince wouldn't think. The Lin family girls had never seen a man before. That evening, my mother suddenly called me into her room. She mysteriously handed me an ornate brocade box. I opened it and saw that inside was a dazzling golden hairpin. The craftsmanship was exquisite, clearly worth a fortune. My mother told me His Highness the Crown Prince had asked her to give it to me, as a token of thanks for my care these past days. I held that cold, precious hairpin, but inside, I felt like a fire had been lit, burning my cheeks. At dinner, I made sure to wear that hairpin. It swayed gently with my movements. Its delicate chimes seemed to be tapping against my heart. I stole a glance at the crown prince, and found him looking back at me. A gentle smile was in his eyes, as if saying, "That hairpin truly suits you." My father and mother exchanged a look, and shared a knowing smile. Only my silly brother kept praising my new accessory, asking which cellar I'd dug up such a treasure from. The disaster was finally under control. The crown prince had to depart for the capital to report. On the morning of his departure, our whole family, along with all the servants and staff, gathered at the courtyard gate to see him off. He changed back into his crown prince robes embroidered with a golden dragon. He exuded an air of natural grace and innate majesty. He was a world apart from the man in simple work clothes, toiling in the fields. He bid a reluctant farewell to my parents and my brother, thanking our family for taking him in and helping him. When it was my turn, he fell silent for a moment. He looked at me, his gaze intense, as if to etch my image into his heart. Then, in front of everyone, he said to me, "Once I return to the capital, I will petition my father, the emperor, to appoint you as a general, granting you a fiefdom supported by the people." Gasps of astonishment rippled through the crowd. My parents were so overwhelmed, they could barely stand. But I felt a pang of disappointment, so it was just a reward. Yet his next words made my heart soar. He told me to wait for him. He would return to marry me. With that, he mounted his horse, and with his personal guards, rode off into the morning sun. I stood there in a daze, clutching the protective charm he had slipped me before leaving. It seemed to still carry the warmth from his palm. My mother wiped away tears of joy, while my father grinned foolishly. Only my brother came over, and spoke to me with uncharacteristic seriousness. "The royal family is not like an ordinary household. From now on, you must think carefully before you act. Don't be as impulsive as before, or you'll get hurt." I looked at his unusually serious expression and nodded firmly. I gazed in the direction the crown prince had left. I couldn't hold back my smile anymore. I waved to my father, mother, and brother. I shouted with gusto, "Enough with the sentimentality. Time to eat." After the crown prince left, life seemed to return to its usual calm. Yet, something felt different. Father no longer sighed in despair. Every day, he energetically led the servants to reinforce the estate walls and take stock of the cellar's provisions. Now, he tells everyone he meets that the best thing he's ever done was to have a daughter as wonderful as me. Mother, meanwhile, took me aside and began teaching me the etiquette and manners of a noble household. Her eyes were full of anticipation and pride. She confided in me that she'd already started preparing my dowry. She vowed to make sure the whole world knew that the Lin family's daughter had a spectacular wedding. My brother remained the ultimate doting brother, but besides grilling chicken wings for me, he'd occasionally pull out a book on military strategy from his robes. He'd study it intently, nodding along. He said it was to prepare for assisting His Highness and protecting me, the future crown princess, in the future. As for me, I developed a new habit. Every morning, I'd go to the courtyard gate and gaze toward the capital, lost in thought. My hand would clutch that protective charm tightly. The old steward noticed. He said to me with a chuckle, "It seems the young lady's heart has flown away with His Highness the Crown Prince. Once the snow melts completely, and the roads are passable, we should return to the main estate in the city with the master. It will also be more convenient for any imperial edicts from the capital." After the Crown Prince left, a full month passed before we received his first letter. It wasn't delivered by the usual carrier pigeon, but by a team of travel-worn imperial guards, who rode post-haste to deliver it personally. The captain of the guards saw my father, saluted him respectfully, and presented a sealed brocade box. He said it was written in the Crown Prince's own hand. My father took it excitedly, and opened it with great care. Inside was a letter. The paper carried a faint scent of ambergris. The handwriting was bold and powerful. In the letter, he didn't dwell on romantic sentiments. He simply reported he was safe, saying he had returned to the capital and completed his mission. He reported the details of the snow disaster to the emperor, and the merits of our Lin family. The emperor was greatly pleased, and official rewards would be forthcoming soon. He told us to wait at ease. At the end of the letter, he added a single line in tiny script, asking if the chickens in my yard were still enough to eat. He urged me not to worry too much, and to wait patiently for things to improve. Just those few words, yet they made me blush instantly. My parents looked on, and shared a knowing smile. I fetched the ink and brush, and earnestly wrote a reply. I told him we had plenty of chickens to eat at home. My brother's chicken farming business is booming. We probably couldn't finish them all before his next visit. I even drew a plump roasted chicken wing and attached it to the letter. From that day on, every 10 days or half a month, we would receive a letter from him. He'd tell me amusing stories from the imperial court, and ask about how things were at home. Sometimes he'd even send over some novel little trinkets from the capital. Our bond quietly grew stronger through these letters. It became unshakably firm. Spring returned to the land, and the ice and snow melted away. Just as the Crown Prince had promised, the court's disaster relief teams and supplies arrived quickly, with the first batch of grain our family provided. As a foundation, the subsequent rescue work proceeded exceptionally smoothly. Though the Crown Prince was far away in the capital, he seemed to know everything happening here intimately. Through his letters, he precisely guided us on when to distribute seeds, and when to repair houses. He even considered in minute detail how to soothe the victim's emotions. My father practically became the Crown Prince's representative here. He led the old steward and the servants, sorted and categorized the supplies we had stockpiled, and methodically coordinated with the government's efforts. Our Lin families, once stockpiled solely for refuge, the grain, cloth, and medicinal herbs, had now become life-saving treasures. The way the villagers look at us has shifted from initial envy to genuine gratitude and respect. I watch the figures, busy at work in the fields again. I see on their weathered faces, smiles blooming once more. A sense of unprecedented satisfaction wells up inside me. This land has finally come back to life. And all of this only turned around because of that person's arrival. Finally, one early summer morning, a genuine royal procession arrived with fanfare at the Lin residence. The lead eunuch held a bright yellow imperial decree. He proclaimed loudly. The decree stated, in essence, that Lin Dihai was loyal to the throne and devoted to the country, established granaries and aided in disaster relief. His merits served the state. He was thus appointed as an imperial merchant, granted the third-rank official hat. He was permitted to establish a business in the capital. His son, Lin Xiuwen, excels in both civil and military arts. A talented young man, he is granted entry to the capital guards for training. His daughter, Lin Xiu, is gentle and virtuous, wise and perceptive. She possesses the talent to benefit the world. She is hereby granted the title of Lady Anping. She is betrothed to the Crown Prince. She is to depart for the capital immediately, with the wedding to be held on an auspicious day next spring. The moment the decree was finished, my parents were moved to tears. My brother grinned like a fool. As for me, I just felt a huge weight had finally lifted from my heart. All that remained was the sweet anticipation of seeing him soon, and the excitement. Our Lin family's fortune is truly about to change. The procession summoned to the capital set off swiftly. My entire family, along with our steward, and several dozen loyal servants, embarked on the road to the capital. As the carriage left the county town, I lifted the curtain to look back. I saw the land once desolate from the snow disaster, now brimming with life once more. The fields were lush with late rice, and on the people's faces, smiles had returned. I thought, this must be the sight he wanted me to see. In my past life, I never imagined I could walk out alive of that hopeless snowy plain. I dared not dream that one day I would travel in such glory to the foot of the Son of Heaven, to marry the one my heart desires. This second chance at life is truly good. Our steward managed the entire journey with perfect order. He would often lift the carriage curtain and cheerfully tell me stories about the capital's customs and people. His words were filled with hope for the future. After half a month of travel, we finally arrived at the capital. The Crown Prince did not have us enter the palace directly, nor did he lodge us at the official post station. Instead, he settled us in a suburban villa named Qingli Court. We were settled there. The villa's scenery was elegant and serene. Pavilions and towers, small bridges overflowing water. Every plant and tree showed signs of meticulous care. We had just stepped down from the carriage when I saw a familiar figure standing at the courtyard gate, smiling as he watched us. He was dressed in a set of dark-colored casual robes. His posture was upright, with handsome features. Who else could it be but the Crown Prince? He had lost some weight, but his eyes were even brighter and more spirited. Several months had passed since we last met. The commanding presence that belonged to the Chu army was even stronger in him now. Yet, the look he gave me was still as gentle as our first meeting. My parents and my brother immediately knelt to pay their respects, but he personally helped them up. No need for formalities. From now on, we are family. He walked up to me. His gaze was intense as he looked at me. 1,000 words were ultimately condensed into a single whisper. Sure, do you know how long I've waited for you? In that moment, the fatigue from the journey vanished. My heart was filled to the brim. I settled into the green pear courtyard. Whenever the Crown Prince had a free moment, he would leave the palace to visit me. He would accompany me on walks in the courtyard, and patiently listen to my stories from the journey. One day, the Empress sent an edict, inviting me to the palace to admire the flowers. I knew this was my future mother-in-law testing me. In the imperial garden, I saw many noble ladies in elaborate attire and fine makeup. Their eyes were filled with undisguised scrutiny and jealousy. Among them was Princess Anning, the Empress's own niece. She was also the one previously considered the best candidate for Crown Princess. Holding a teacup, she asked me, seemingly casually, "I've heard Miss Lin comes from a merchant family. I wonder if you have any unique insights into this garden full of exotic flowers and plants. I am of humble birth, a merchant's daughter who knows nothing of romance and poetry. I only know that if these flowers could be made into incense or medicine, they would surely fetch a good price, and could help many people in need." As soon as I said that, the noble ladies around me covered their mouths and giggled. They thought I was utterly uncouth, but the Empress seated at the head of the room had a flash of approval in her eyes. Just then, the Crown Prince happened to pass by after court. He walked straight to my side, and naturally took my hand. He said to Princess Anning, "My Crown Princess has the world at heart. She sees the people's livelihood in every flower and blade of grass. That is the quality I admire most." After hearing the Crown Prince's words, Princess Anning's face instantly turned extremely sour. After that incident in the Imperial Garden, within the circles of noble ladies in the capital, no one dared to trouble me lightly. The Crown Prince's protection of me was so obvious and steadfast. He also began visiting me more and more frequently. We would play chess under the moonlight. He always let me win, intentionally or not. Seeing my triumphant look after winning a game, he would smile with utter fondness. He would also guide my hand as I practiced calligraphy. His hand was large and warm, covering the back of mine. The ink on the page seems to carry his warmth. He would tell me about the disputes at court, those complex interpersonal relationships, and political games. In his telling, they all became fascinating stories, and I, relying on fragmented memories from my past life, and the sharp intuition honed in business, could occasionally offer some insights that made his eyes light up. For example, I suggested he could emulate my father's trading company model to establish an official logistics and storage system. This way, it wouldn't just ensure supplies during wartime and famine years, but could also generate revenue for the national treasury through commercial operations in peacetime. He fell into deep thought, praising me for my extraordinary talent. Our relationship has long surpassed the initial debt of saving my life and simple romantic feelings. We are each other's confidants and partners who can fight side by side. The wedding is set for early next spring. Before that, there's one matter that needs to be settled. The Crown Prince took me to the prison at the Dali Temple. In the deepest cell, I saw Xin Yan. Gone was the aloof scholar he once was. Filthy all over, gaunt and emaciated. His eyes were dull and numb. Seeing us, he clung to us like a lifeline, frantically throwing himself at the cell door, sobbing and begging for his life, saying he knew he was wrong. The Crown Prince, expressionless, ordered someone to read out his crimes. Exam fraud, deceiving the emperor, colluding with bandits to obstruct disaster relief, plotting to harm an imperial official, each one deserving death 1,000 times over. The Crown Prince told me the examiner Xin Yan colluded with was a protege of the Vice Minister of Personnel. Behind them, they had formed a small interest group, attempting to place their own people through the imperial exams. This time, using Xin Yan as a lead, the emperor has followed the trail and uprooted this entire group, cleansing the court considerably. As for Xin Yan, the emperor, considering he caused no substantial harm to the Crown Prince, and that he helped expose the plot, showed leniency, sentenced him to exile 3,000 miles away, never to return to the capital. Watching Xin Yan being dragged away, with that desperate, venomous look in his eyes, my heart remained utterly calm. The grudges from my past life finally vanished completely in that moment. His future suffering is a consequence of his own actions. The Crown Prince seemed to sense the calmness in my heart. He gently took my hand. His palm was warm and strong. It dispelled the chill of the prison, and also chased away the last trace of gloom from my past life. After leaving the prison, the Crown Prince didn't take me back to Qinglin Garden. Instead, we went straight to the Eastern Palace. He said the Eastern Palace had long prepared a place for me. From now on, I wouldn't have to travel to the outskirts, and he could see me every day. Though the Eastern Palace's scenery isn't as elegant as Qingli Garden, it's more orderly and majestic. The side hall was tidied up, warm and cozy. The silver charcoal in the brazier was burning brightly. What surprised me even more was a spacious storeroom on one side of the hall. Pushing the door open, I saw it was already stocked with many things: fine cotton cloth, thick fox fur, various rare medicinal herbs, and several boxes of exquisitely packaged pastries and dried goods. There was even the fine rice and white flour I cherished most in my past life. Everything was neatly arranged. It was clearly prepared with great care. The Crown Prince stood behind me. He said softly, "This storeroom is just the beginning. In the future, I'll gather all the finest things and hoard them for you." I turned to look at him. His gaze was so tender it could melt one's heart. There was no imperial majesty, only genuine affection and indulgence for me. At that moment, I suddenly felt all the suffering from my past life was worth it. It was those searing pains that allowed me to seize a chance at life after rebirth, and to meet the person before me now, whose heart and eyes are filled with me. The housekeeper brought warm lotus seed soup. She gently reminded us it was time to rest for a while. The Crown Prince helped me sit down. He personally fed me a sip. The sweet, not cloying taste spread on my tongue, just like the gentleness he gives me. He kept chattering to me about all the trivial matters in the capital. He's already sent people out to buy grain and supplies from various places. Not only does he want to stockpile enough food and clothing for me, but he also wants to prepare for next year's spring plowing, to avoid another famine like the one before. I listened quietly, occasionally nodding in response. I felt completely at peace. This feeling of being cherished and protected, of not having to scheme for survival alone anymore. It's something I've never felt since my rebirth. We returned together to the Green Pear Courtyard. First, to pack and move to the Eastern Palace. Second, because I was worried about the supplies I'd hoarded myself. The storeroom here is even bigger than the Eastern Palaces. It's piled high with the grain I brought from my old country estate. I squatted on the floor, counting everything one by one. A smile unconsciously spread across my face. The Crown Prince squatted beside me, watching me quietly, occasionally reaching out to brush dust off my clothes. My brother walked in, smiling, carrying a basket of freshly grilled chicken wings. He handed me a skewer, said he grilled them especially for me. told me to try them while they're fresh. The Crown Prince also took a skewer and tried a bite. He praised my brother's cooking skills. He even said the Eastern Palace's small kitchen could use my brother's guidance from now on, so I could eat my favorite flavors every day. My brother grinned from ear to ear and quickly agreed, promising he'd manage it well and not let me suffer the slightest grievance. After the inventory was done, the servants began busily loading everything onto carts to be transported to the Eastern Palace. The Crown Prince walked over to me, gently helped me up, and ruffled my hair. I knew you loved to hoard things, but I never imagined you were this good at it, just like a little squirrel. I retorted with a laugh, saying it was all because I was scared by hunger and cold in my dreams. Only by hoarding enough stuff could I feel at ease. The Crown Prince didn't tease me further. He just said seriously that with him here from now on, I'd never need to rely on hoarding for peace of mind. He would be my solid ground, more reliable than any stockpile. After saying that, he held me tightly, resting his chin on the top of my head. His voice was full of affection and determination. We moved smoothly into the Eastern Palace. The Crown Prince specially prepared a much larger storeroom for me. It was even bigger than the storerooms in Qingli Court and the Eastern Palace side halls combined. It was clean, spotless inside. I brought the supplies from Qingli Court and arranged them neatly. Arranged the supplies neatly. Then I added the things the Crown Prince had prepared for me. The storeroom was quickly filled to the brim. Looking at this fully stocked storeroom, my sense of security grew even stronger. Mother also moved to the Eastern Palace with us. Every day, she and the maids would experiment with food, making all sorts of delicious dishes for me. One day it's ginseng chicken soup, the next a whole roasted lamb, the day after, delicate pastries. She often takes my hand and says with guilt that in our past life, she failed me and my brother. In this life, she must make it up to us. Holding her, I comfort her, saying, what's past is past. Now our whole family is doing well, and that's all that matters. Father is busy managing the shops in the capital, while handling business matters. He still remembers to help me hoard supplies. He has people procure rare herbs and local specialties from all over, delivering them continuously to the Eastern Palace. He even says he'll hoard enough silver for me, so I'll never have to worry about money in my life. My younger brother, Tuanzi, has grown a bit. He's lively and adorable. He often follows me and Taizi to the storeroom, pointing at the grains and meats. He asks me in his tiny voice, are all these for sister's stockpile? Making us burst into laughter. The wedding date is getting closer. Taizi is busy with court affairs, while also preparing for our wedding. Even with all the busyness, he still makes time for me. He goes to the storeroom with me every day, helping me take stock. He listens to me chatter about stocking up, never seeming annoyed. One day, I brought a bowl of freshly stewed white fungus soup to his study. Inside the study, Taizi was at his desk reviewing documents. He looked serious. I didn't disturb him. I just placed the soup by his desk and stood quietly nearby, watching his focused expression. Taizi noticed my presence. The seriousness on his face instantly faded, replaced by a gentle smile. He put down his brush and motioned for me to come closer. He had me come to his side. He gently took my hand, pulling me to sit on his lap. He picked up the soup and fed me a sip. His voice was tired but still gentle. He said he's been too busy lately and hasn't spent enough time with me. He asked me not to be upset. I shook my head. I said I know he's working hard. I'm not upset. I leaned against his chest, looking at the documents on the desk. My eyes caught a report about grain reserves across the regions. So I asked him, are the grain reserves in all regions arranged? Will there be another famine like before? Taizi patted my head and said, it's all taken care of. I've had granaries built everywhere to stockpile grain. I've also sent people to guide farmers to cultivate hardy, drought-resistant crops. Furthermore, following your father's business model, I've established an official logistics and storage system. The tragedy from before will not repeat. Hearing that filled my heart with warmth. I hugged him tightly and told him how wonderful he was. The Crown Prince smiled and said everything he did was for me, for our family, and for the people of the realm. He never wanted to see people suffer from cold and hunger again. He never wanted to witness the tragedy of families torn apart and destroyed. In that moment, I was even more certain I had chosen the right man. This man before me not only had his heart and eyes set on me, but also carried the weight and responsibility for the world. A man like him was worthy of entrusting my life to. Time flew by. In the blink of an eye, it was the eve of the wedding. My mother sat by my bedside, adjusting my wedding attire, while constantly wiping away her tears. She held my hand, and repeatedly advised me, life in the palace is not like home. Think carefully about everything, be filial to your in-laws, and respect the Crown Prince as an honored guest. I smiled and hugged her, telling her I remembered all her words. She looked at me, and suddenly sighed, saying all of this felt like a dream. She brought up that incident from our past life again, the coat stuffed with willow catkins. Her eyes were full of guilt. I shook my head. I told her that without the bitterness of the past, there would be no sweetness in this life. Perhaps everything was meant to be. I asked her not to dwell on the past anymore, but to look at the good life we have now. My father's business as a royal merchant in the capital was thriving. My brother in the Imperial Guard was also praised repeatedly for his bravery in battle. Our whole family was living a life we never dared to imagine in our past life. Hearing this, my mother finally smiled through her tears. On the day of the grand wedding, a sea of red bridal gifts stretched for miles, and the whole world celebrated. I wore the intricate wedding dress, veiled under a red headdress. My own brother carried me to the bridal sedan chair. Amidst the deafening sounds of drums and music, I was carried into the imperial palace. We walked down the long palace path, and finally stopped before the gates of the Eastern Palace. A slender, strong hand lifted the sedan curtain. He helped me out, steady and sure. I couldn't see his face, but I could feel the warmth from his palm. Just like when we first met in the snow, warm and steadfast. Hand in hand, we walked the red carpet. We bowed to heaven and earth, bowed to our parents, and finally, to each other as husband and wife. When he gently used the jade scepter to lift my red veil, I saw his smiling eyes. They reflected the candlelight, and my destiny for the rest of my life. He whispered to me, "I finally get to marry you. You look so beautiful today. The most beautiful girl I've ever seen." Then he leaned down, and on my forehead, placed a soft kiss. It carried a faint scent of ambergris, gentle and reverent. He didn't do anything more. He just held me gently, on the bed, and spoke to me softly, easing the tension and shyness in my heart. He said he'd waited a long time for this day. Ever since he first saw me at the old country house, he was drawn to me. The more time we spent together, the more he liked me. He liked my lively, cute nature, my kindness and courage, everything about me, even my little willfulness and temper. He loved them all. Early the next morning, the sky was just beginning to lighten. I woke up. The crown prince was still holding me, sleeping soundly. A trace of weariness showed between his brows. I suppose yesterday's wedding was too elaborate and tiring. I shifted slightly, not wanting to wake him, but he woke up anyway. He opened his eyes, and seeing me, his face immediately lit up. With a gentle smile, he pulled me closer into his embrace. "My dear crown princess, you're awake. Sleep a little longer. No need to get up so early." I shook my head. I said I couldn't sleep anymore. The crown prince smiled helplessly. He got up and helped me put on a thick brocade robe. Then he dressed himself. Holding my hand, we went to have breakfast together. Afterwards, we went to the storehouse. It was still packed full. The crown prince pointed at the supplies, and said with a smile that from now on, all this was ours. I could eat or use it however I wanted. If it ever ran low, he would have more purchased. He'd make sure it was always fully stocked for me. I looked at him, my heart filled with happiness. In the days after the wedding, the crown prince was still busy every day, with court affairs, but he always made time for me. Every morning, he would accompany me to the storehouse to check the supplies. At noon, he would have lunch with me, listening to me chatter about trivial things. In the evening, he would accompany me for a walk in the Eastern Palace courtyard. We'd watch the sunset and talk about the future. At night, he would hold me as I fell asleep, telling me strange tales from the capital. The days passed like this, one after another, full and happy. In the spring of the following year, the gardens of the Eastern Palace were in full bloom. I was sitting on a stone bench, watching my little brother Tuanzi, who was now old enough to banter with me, being lifted high by my elder brother, giggling with delight. My father was now a true imperial merchant, not only managing business for the royal family, but also expanding trade overseas. He added immense revenue to the national treasury. The old steward became the chief steward of the Eastern Palace, keeping everything in perfect order. He often said that serving the crown prince and crown princess was the greatest fortune of his life. Footsteps approached. The crown prince, having finished his duties, came and sat beside me. He gently draped a cloak over my shoulders, then took my hand in his. He told me he had just received news from the border. Shen Yan, in the land of his exile, had succumbed to a severe illness from the harsh cold. As for that stepson of his, Shaoman, back when Shen Yan was arrested, he had taken the last of his silver and fled. No one knows where he went. I nodded. The fates of those people no longer mattered to me. The crown prince looked at my elder brother and little brother playing in the distance, and softly said, "Our child will also have an uncle and a great-uncle, who dote on him like that." His words took me by surprise. My cheeks flushed slightly. I gently placed my hand on my slightly rounded belly. His eyes were full of warmth. He drew me into an embrace. The sun was warm, the breeze gentle. Our Lin family, and our own little family, have so many wonderful days ahead of us.